The closest thing to magic that we have today has to be medicine. Think about it. It drives how long we live and how we care for our loved ones when they're most vulnerable. This is the Founders and Builders podcast, and today we're diving into the future of medicine. So here's the problem. To bring a new drug to market, that clinical trials process can still take years. So we don't know until after the fact whether the treatment's even really working. Today's guest, Dr. Olga Kubassova, is changing all of that. She's a biotech investor, a mathematician by background, and she's founded the Image Analysis Group. Why wait until the end of a billion-dollar research study when imaging biomarkers can show us exactly how a patient is responding right now? Olga's advised governments, venture funds, and some of the world's biggest pharma companies.
So you have to have your passion first. You have to have a rough product second. And a mindset that the whole thing may change and you should be ready for it.
So as always, if you enjoy this episode, feel free to subscribe. Now let's get into it. Olga, thanks so much for joining the podcast.
It's a pleasure.
So for those that haven't met you, I'd love you to walk us through the kind of context. What do I need to know about Olga that's sitting in front of me today?
Well, I come from a background of mathematics and computer science. And I found myself doing PhD in medical imaging. So when I arrived to England in 2004, my School of Computing of the University of Leeds was located right next to Leeds General Infirmary, which is one of the largest hospitals in Europe for musculoskeletal imaging. And the problems existed around how to process novel imaging types they were acquiring. And so my PhD kind of landed on, okay, let's develop a few algorithms to see how we can deal with large volumes of imaging data. So by the end of my 3-year PhD, I had a massive book with a number of algorithms starting from how do we segment a particular tissue type, or how do we quantify certain manifestations of the disease, or how do we interpret that data in a more robust way. And so that book of algorithms, and in addition to that, few publications presented at the conferences, pretty much allowed me to build a network of like-minded professionals, I suppose. So some of them are with me till this day. So I was presenting at the conferences, talking about my tech, and radiologists from around the world really were coming up and saying, okay, well, this is very applicable to what we do. Maybe we can try it with different data. Let's see how it works. And then by the time I was about to finish my PhD, everybody was saying, please don't just stop, because this is useful. So I came up to my supervisor and I said, well, maybe we should start a company. I think it has some value. But it was 2007, so really nobody was starting companies. And I was at the time in my early 20s, and basically the answer was no, let's not do that. So then I went to Vice Chancellor and I said, well, nobody wants to do anything. I'd like to do something with my PhD. Can I start a company? So at the end, I got a letter from the university saying, you can do whatever you want with your PhD, just leave us alone. So I went off and I received a grant from a local development agency called Yorkshire Forward. So it was Leeds, Yorkshire. And they gave me some money to invest into a newly formed company. Also, I met a very experienced entrepreneur on the way, so Peter Thompson, who became my mentor in this journey, who gave me an award, like Entrepreneur's Award of £5,000. So I collected all that money and I put a little bit of my own, and my first year revenue was 37,000.
And what exactly were you building?
I was building software, which I thought I'm going to sell to radiologists. So people who were my friends became my customers. Well, they had to, because we had no other customers.
If they wanted to still be your friends.
Precisely, that was a condition. And so we started this journey kind of with a few people and a piece of software. And I hired a friend of mine to write the software, and I made myself a salesperson on an advocate of the software. So we were going pretty much to every conference trying to convince people it has value, and it was an incredible time of development of very prominent anti-inflammatory drugs. The world's most famous drug, Humira, was invented by a company called AbbVie, used to be called Abbott. And the success of the drug was so tremendous that they were looking for tools, innovative technologies, tools which can support understanding of the efficacy of the drug in different populations. So my methodology from the PhD was allowing to recognize inflammatory activity in the hands of rheumatoid arthritis patients.
That was the therapeutic area, rheumatoid.
Rheumatoid arthritis. So the inflammatory activity in the hands of rheumatoid arthritis patient, assessment within literally weeks, which allowed us to be extremely precise with what we're seeing. And AbbVie surprisingly became the first customer. So that's how the story began. So they gave us a consultancy contract, they bought a few licenses of software, we placed software in the hands of experienced key opinion leaders and PIs.
What's a PI?
Primary investigator or principal investigator of the trial. So somebody who would run the trial, somebody who understands clinical development. And so those people were testing the platform, testing the software, looking at the outcome measures, so it was fascinating. And then we built a real infrastructure around analysis. So the idea was that the platform would be sold to people who can process imaging data and get meaningful insights into how drug works or how patient responds or anything like that. So we tried on psoriatic arthritis. So rheumatoid is one of the areas, and psoriatic arthritis is kind of related disease, also driven by inflammation. Lupus is another rheumatic disease. There are multiple rheumatic diseases. So we ran it for 2 years. We made a huge number of publications. We validated everything I was developing in academic settings in real clinical setup. And that's the start of the business. So that's how I found myself having a company which I called Image Analysis originally, software Dynamica, and me and a small team.
IAG now.
It became Image Analysis Group once we opened US office, we opened India office. So the idea is to build a whole group of companies, which is Image Analysis Group, IAG.
I'd love to wind back to, did you say it was 2007?
Yeah.
When you finished your PhD in Leeds?
Yeah.
Take us back to, the world that Olga saw then. I mean, I remember clearly when we spoke before that you had this real feeling that if I don't do this, if I don't build a business or at least try, I'll really regret it. Like, what did the world look like?
Yeah, it's interesting because, you're coming out of PhD and you have really options to forget whatever you were doing and move on. You can stay in academia, you continue on your PhD journey, maybe become a professor and lecturer and doing academic work. I mean, that's the options really. So none of those options probably suit me personality-wise. So I couldn't just let go of things I thought were valuable. And academic world, while superbly interesting, but quite different from reality. So it's more of a, nowadays maybe it's not so different, but used to be very theoretical, very pure, without business angle to it. So I saw the world from okay, I have really nothing to lose, but I have a lot to accomplish if I do that right. And the thought that, if I don't do it, nobody's actually going to do it because it's not something which was commonly done at the time. I think that thought was probably the most sort of vivid in my head. So if I give it a year, it doesn't work, I close the company, nobody's going to die literally. So I can move on with my life. So I give it a go and see what happens.
And for you, was it the kind of passion for solving the problem that kind of pulled what was Dynamica out of you and the company? Or was it, I just have a curiosity to see what the art of the possible is? What was driving you at the time?
I don't know. To be honest, looking so far back, nearly 20 years, I think it was more around, I think this is valuable. Nobody thinks it has any value. Let me prove them wrong. Which, of course, not the healthiest place to start business, but I think it was before I realized that it actually could have real opportunity. Definitely before. I cannot claim that I thought I'm going to solve the world's hardest problems. But a couple of thoughts were in my head. First of all, that, if I leave something which I believe has value, I will always think about it for the rest of my life and think, oh my God, what if I'd done it? What would have happened? And I don't want to live with that thought ever. I want to make my decisions, try them out, see how it works out, and then, move on if it doesn't. But another thought was sort of, I just spent 3 years on working from 7 a.m. till midnight. I was first in the lab, last out. And literally I have this book of algorithms. My PhD book was, I don't know, like 9 chapters or something ridiculous. My Viva took 6 hours. Viva is a PhD exam. It was like absolutely insane amount of information condensed into articles and paperwork. And I'm just gonna leave it without any use. That I think was driving me to try it out. And I think later on I realized that there are so many people like me. We all do PhDs in computer science within a specific indication. We believe this has value, but we don't have an outlet to apply it. We might try to collaborate, or we might try to maybe get extension of our PhD, but then it kind of dies. So Dynamica as a platform today, one of the incredibly valuable additions to the platform is that we can bring all of those methodologies onto a platform and deploy them in clinical trials. It has to have 2 components. It has to have innovation component and standardization, security, compliance component. So Dynamica already brings the standardization, security, compliance. So what we could add to it is novel ideas. So if somebody today, like me, has an algorithm, placing them on Dynamica, placing that methodology onto Dynamica and seeing it in trials takes no time in real world, right? So it may take us a few months versus building a business around one methodology takes you 10 years. And there is no guarantee it's going to succeed. So back then in 2007, I was creating a platform for getting my own algorithms on it with the thought that actually there may be others, and sure enough, there were others pretty much immediately.
I'd love to get into these models and Dynamica as a platform, but I think for the listeners that are maybe not from the world that you come from, right, within biotech and pharma, I'd love to take maybe 5 steps back and just start with walk us through the end-to-end process of drug development.
Okay, with pleasure. So when you have a new drug, so you're a biotech company or a pharma company and you have developed a new drug candidate, or you're thinking that you have a new drug candidate for development, you firstly take it into healthy volunteers, if possible, right? So it's a very small group of patients which take your new drug candidate, and all we're watching for is that there are no dangerous side effects, there are no dangers to those people. So they normally male healthy volunteers. So very small group of people. Then you go into what's called dose escalation, and it's a phase 1B trial. So healthy volunteers normally phase 1. Phase 1B is when you escalate the dose of your drug. So you're trying to do 2 things. You're trying to find the optimal dose, and you're also looking for side effects and any manifestations of the drug which you don't want. So once you found the optimal dose, you then start looking for efficacy. And this is where phase 2 trials begin. So phase 2 is when you take a group of people and some of them will take drugs as per standard of care, so whatever they normally do. And another group would take standard of care plus your new therapeutic. Different combinations. Sometimes there isn't a standard of care, so then patients would take nothing versus your therapeutic. Sometimes there are groups of patients with comorbidities, so they would be managing something else. In addition, they would take your new drug. But the idea is that within 100 to maybe few hundred people, you're going to have this initial assessment of efficacy. And the goal of the phase 2 trial is to separate placebo group from those who were on your drug. So those need to clearly separate. There are many specifics there because you would be looking for an endpoint. So in every trial you would have a number of endpoints of the trial. So it's a measurable assessment which occurs at the end of the trial. So you conduct this assessment in a standard of care group versus the treatment group.
Some kind of target metrics.
Some kind of target metrics, exactly that. So, and those can vary, right? They depending on the indications, they vary. So the target metric normally is the one which would be required by the FDA. So it's a US regulator or the European regulator or maybe some other more specific regulatory agencies. That would be the primary endpoint. And then you build secondary endpoints in your trial because you're trying to build the story of your drug. You're trying to explain how it works. Let's say your drug is a painkiller, but it also reduces inflammation. So you don't want just to go with a painkiller because that would be very narrow and potentially many other competitors already proven that. So you're kind of competing with everything else on the market. So you add in the secondary endpoint and exploratory endpoints which give you fuller picture about your drug. Every indication would have its own specifics, from very famous ones like cancer or obesity. You really will be thinking about your strategy behind the drug. So in my world of imaging would be a tool to differentiate your drug, to build the efficacy around the drug. So radiology as a discipline in drug development is used for assessment of efficacy, safety, and differentiation. Once you're done with your phase 2, you figure out your target population, your dose. You're pretty confident how it responds, so how patients respond versus the standard of care. You take it at scale, so you go into phase 3. And normally phase 3 is a global trial where you involve various populations. So you may have somebody from Asia, US, Europe, different probably ages and sexes. So you have to have the broader populations there. And that's a very complicated trial to run logistically. So you simplify your endpoints to the minimum, literally. Once you finish with your phase 3, and hopefully it's successful, so you demonstrated that your novel drug candidate adds value to standard of care. You finish your phase 3, you submit your package to the regulator, the drug gets approved, and then you have a chance to amplify your claims through running phase 4. So phase
I've never heard of phase 4.
Yeah, so phase 4 is post-approval sort of studies, which are run either, again, at scale, so you can decide how scalable you want it to be, or you could run it to prove specific claims. You can have even the smallest phase 4s. Sometimes you run head-to-head phase 4, so 2 companies compete for the same market. They have similar performing drugs, so they run head-to-head trials to prove that their drug is better than competitors. Quite a tough place to be.
And are they almost like racing for the patent?
It's not a patent. They already have all their patents at the beginning of the process. So the molecule itself is patented, the delivery mechanism is patented, whatever associated technologies are patented, that's already there. They own the IP to their drug. What they're racing for is a market size. So, and also ability to convince the audience that what they have has value, right? So the audience are physicians who are prescribing those drugs. And I think it's fascinating because used to be, not long ago, people were convincing physicians that their drug is better than another based on maybe the size of the booth at the conference. But now it's all about data. It's all about trust into the data. It's all about how to interpret the data, deep understanding of the drug. And again, every indication would be slightly different because, if you have a rare disease, you have a very limited population. and maybe it's the only option, then of course your strategy is different, right? Whereas if you go into a market with already pre-existing drugs, then you're building a highly differentiating strategy. So imaging comes to help you to differentiate. Comes in many ways, comes to help you to stratify your patients, comes to differentiate your drug, to objectively assess certain manifestations of the drug performance and patient response. But maybe imaging might be the next topic we talk about.
Yeah, brilliant. And before we get into imaging, I was looking into a bit of research into some of the drugs that have become most valued by, let's say, society in general, all the way from, I think, penicillin was discovered by accident in 1928, I think it was, by Alexander Fleming. And then Ozempic, before Novo Nordisk popularized it in 2015, I think it was actually invented in the 90s. And it took over 20 years to then come to FDA approval. It seems that everyone's talking about how AI can be used to kind of speed up or provide richer data or clearer insight into which of these drugs we should take through from phase 2 onwards. If we can get really specific, how is AI useful in this process?
Okay, well, that's a wonderful question. So I think people talk about AI like it's some sort of one methodology to deploy, right? So I think by now we all know that there are multiple apps, each serves a purpose, right? ChatGPT would serve a purpose of a general platform we can interact with. Some other AI platform would serve a purpose of video editing. Some other platform would serve the purpose of image editing. So AI in drug development and clinical trials should be thought in a very similar fashion. So there is AI for improving operational efficiencies. Simply when you deal with complex data, even cleaning of that data requires some effort, massive effort in fact. You deal with stakeholders within a clinical trial which are disconnected. So you have 100 clinical sites which are going to acquire your images. You have 2 or 3 independent radiologist readers who will read those images. You have a project management team. You have a quality assurance team. Each of those stakeholders, technically disconnected, so you need to connect them. So one application of AI is connectivity of the stakeholders, unification of information, and getting us to a very reliable point where we can trust the information we're looking at. But what's true artificial intelligence is capable of doing is actually giving us insights from big data sets. So let's say we have 3 trials thrown into one platform. We have patient populations which are not necessarily the same. You have data points and endpoints which also varied. And you want to ask what is the subgroup of patients across these 3 trials which would be more suitable for my new drug. So this is a true AI, right? So this is something, it's not obvious to a scientist or mathematician. So when we're talking about AI in drug development, I think when we're going through phase 1, right, the purpose of it is, can we just quickly go through the data management? Can we understand the optimal dose? And so AI can help us here. So it's a smaller data in terms of scale, but it's a very specific questions we want to answer. Phase 2, I think, where AI is the second type of AI when we're getting more insights from the data, is very valuable. Because you've got a sophisticated trial design with maybe secondary and experimental endpoints which give you broader and deeper assessment of your drug performance. You're acquiring this data with great difficulties because you have to standardize all the 100 sites who are participating. So extracting more information from the same data, this is where AI really makes a huge difference. Also, phase 2s are not always conclusive. You always have outliers. I've never seen a trial which clearly tells you that every single patient you recruited responded in a very consistent way. So what you really want to do with AI is to go back to your screening, your baseline measurement, and understand if there is a subgroup of patients that responded better, and if there is a subgroup of patients that didn't respond, so you can actually get this information out quickly. And why you want it? To aid your phase 3. Because when you're going into this scalable, extremely expensive trial, you really want to be sure that you're going to succeed. In phase 3 now, where the logistics is probably the main issue, right? You've got now not 100 sites, but 1,000. You've got a scale population. So AI could really help you to harmonize the inputs and outputs. It harmonizes how stakeholders communicate with each other, what type of workflows they use, cleaning of the data, assuring the quality of the data, and then of course dealing with a database, you know. So I think it's a huge power of AI just to deal with a database of numbers.
Super, super quick one from me. As you know, Founders and Builders podcast is a completely new channel. So if you're enjoying this episode, feel free to hit the subscribe button down below. And now let's get back into it. Yeah, one of the techniques that you mentioned that comes to mind is this idea of clustering, where the model is able, independent of you telling it, this is the target variable I'm trying to optimize for, you feed in a bunch of data and it will pull out, often from unstructured data like images, clusters of, hey, this is something that you didn't know that you should be looking at.
Precisely. I think AI has all of that ability, and I think if we think about phase of the trial versus applications of AI, we can both accelerate our workflow and reach the right decision, the optimal decision. And of course, sometimes the decision would be that this drug doesn't work, but that saves enormous amount of money and effort, and you can divert that budget to do something else.
How are you seeing AI come into the value chain? Is it, the large pharma companies that are maybe investing in phase 1, 2, and distribution of the drug past phase 3 are kind of bringing in-house AI teams? Is it a lot of consultancies that are specialists in certain therapeutic areas? What does that look like?
It's a great question. So I think to make AI operational, I don't think pharma company employing AI team is probably necessarily the answer. I mean, of course, anybody can do employment and whatever they want to do, but I think it's a really collaboration between tech and pharma. Because tech companies like ours, so we are what's called imaging clinical research organization. So clinical research organization, but we focus on imaging as a niche. We tech-powered organization. We know everything there is to know about imaging in tech. Pharma company collaborating with somebody like us would of course benefit from already established infrastructure, which took us 10 years to build, already benefit from the specific expertise around radiology and imaging. And then what's really valuable, they can overlay their medical understanding of the drug. So pharma and biotech founders or builders, they spend years on understanding the mechanism of action of the drug. So their main value is in understanding deeply what this drug does, what it doesn't do, how patients respond, what are various manifestations of that drug in the population. Having that understanding, even just being written as a text, but then translated into endpoints and biomarkers. So something very measurable and something very tangible with a tech platform. I think that collaboration makes a true special source.
You mentioned before about this balance between innovation and mass production. And different companies approach this equation, this balancing act, in their own way. How do you see that the most successful companies are being able to balance this? And I think this question comes from a place of, I have friends that have done PhDs, I have friends that have completely focused on commercial side, not necessarily in biotech, but other industries. And they seem to be almost the opposite kind of operating model for how you would set that up. You've got potentially a group of free-spirited academics or scientists that are testing different hypotheses. And it's a very unpredictable, non-deterministic process of just often throwing lots of combinations at the wall and seeing what sticks. And then you've got a business that needs to meet key revenue goals and distribution. How do you see that the most successful companies have brought that together?
So I'll speak on our behalf because I think we are successful in this industry, and we needed to reach the balance between innovating and actually delivering something, because the delivery of clinical trial is what generates revenue for image analysis group or anybody else in this industry. So by building a platform which is focused very much on the delivery of any type of imaging in any type of trial, so really solidifying that tech, which has, and it took us a long time, we are now in version 7, but I think we're getting it right. You cannot get it right once. You have to get it right every 2 or 3 years because tech moves so fast. So your foundation has to be such that you can add innovation as it comes. So we believe that we can go to any biotech or pharma company and say, if you have imaging in your trial and you're gonna deploy the imaging related endpoints for safety or efficacy, we can help you operationally. At this stage, you can just take something which already written, a clinical protocol, implement it and focus on delivery. That is mass production in some way. I mean, not quite mass production, still requires a lot of thinking and implementation, but it could work pretty much for anybody in our industry, even those who just want to experiment. Now, what's innovation in this world? If you want to go into, let's say, obesity, you can put patient on a scale, they lose weight, that's your endpoint. However, so many people can do exactly that, from really large pharma to really small biotechs. And how do you compete? Who lost most weight in a given time, right? So that's your metric. Or you can understand how body reacts to your drug. For instance, losing or gaining muscle. What happens to the bone mass? What happens to your liver? Because you might be losing fat in your liver. What happens to your brain? Because maybe there are some changes in the brain. So you're building the imaging strategy to innovate in a quite, I'd say, already more or less established market. So now you produced your drug for obesity or patients with obesity, and you have metrics from weight loss, that's your primary endpoint, all the way to differentiating innovative measures which give you an edge. So you can now go to the patients or physicians and say, so my drug helps you to lose weight and gain muscle. Or my drug is so safe that I tested it in such and such population that when you're losing weight, you're not experiencing any harmful side effects. And this is like a simplistic example of mass production versus innovation. If you step into cancer research, it becomes mind-boggling because the amount of diversity in cancer population, every patient is a specific, sort of a specific manifestation of cancers and specific manifestation of response to the drug. So you want to unify populations, at the same time you want to develop personalized therapies, at the same time you want to keep the cost low. How do you innovate in that space? I mean, only through the right data points. Of course, you have to invent good drugs, but then to place them in the right place, to build a strategy, to test them successfully, it all comes down to data. And that data very often comes from radiology because we're looking at tumor sizes, tumor volume, tumor vascularity, cellular density. All these measures come from imaging biomarkers.
You mentioned there unified treatments versus personalized medicine. Now, I've been thinking about this a little bit lately. Do you think it's realistic, let's say within the next 50 years, that we're able to, given a certain set of symptoms and give a certain demographic, size, weight, gender, as you wish, where in the world you're from, that we're able to create truly personalized medication, not just changing various different dose amounts or other variables on the kind of treatment? Is it feasible that for certain high-value subsets of the population that we're looking to treat, we can really tailor some of the drugs that we're bringing to market?
Yes, this is happening already. So we are decoding our body, and we're decoding our genome, so what makes us us. We're also decoding our immune system. It's a very sophisticated organism. The human is extremely sophisticated because, if you think about drug discovery now, right? So you basically have a problem of a pattern recognition, how to recognize the right pattern and create the right combination in very simplistic terms. Once you have your drug, which population it's most applicable to, right? So it's a problem of matching. But then the population itself, if you take, let's take a very narrow area of cancer research called glioblastoma. It's an aggressive tumor in the brain. And it's a small population, very few therapeutic options. Glioblastoma is aggressive tumor. So every single patient will have a very specific brain structure, and the treatments would be also very specific to that tumor. Some of them will be surgery, chemotherapy, gene therapy, cell therapy, immunotherapy. So each of the treatments versus the population would have different manifestations when we're trying this drug in that population. Manifestations of the disease versus the impact of the treatment, is that what we can measure? So now how do we create a very personalized treatment? Of course, we can take that person's sample of the brain in a high level sense. We can take their blood sample, we can take their gene expressions, we can take tumor itself, piece of tumor. We can use that as an input to our AI model and then look for various treatments available. And so there are companies who are doing that. But I think very often we find ourselves in a situation where, yes, we have all that input information from the patient, but there is not the right treatment that matches that information, because we can't invent every treatment possible, right? So it would be something which works for a group of patients. So it's not personalized to that level. But oncology is very much on the way of personalizing treatment. So it would be input about patient information in a tumor, could be liquid or solid tumor, blood tumor or actual tumor. And then you have the treatment choices, which would be best matched back to the patient. So that's personalized. Development of personalized drugs is always very tricky because you need to identify what drives the disease, what happened in that particular population, because that may be comorbidities associated with the disease as well, and then finding the treatment. But you can do more things than, simple things than that. You can just understand in your trials, through your trials, how to stratify your patient population. So when you have a large cohort of patients, and I take slightly different area of, let's say, osteoarthritis, huge population, we're all going to get osteoarthritis or some sort of musculoskeletal disorder of the knee. Some of it is induced by injury, some of it is induced by obesity, some of it is induced by maybe inflammatory pathways within your knee joint. Those are very distinct groups of patient populations, and they will benefit from a distinct treatments. So it's still personalized, but not to you, but to the population. And I think it has a better potential to be commercially successful, affordable, but also successful in development.
One of the things we've talked about before is the importance of kind of sharing these learnings across companies. And I think I remember you talking about like open sourcing the placebo or control sets from these clinical trials.
I mean, that would be a brilliant future endeavor, because every single trial has a placebo arm, meaning these patients are on standard of care. So colliding the placebo patients into a single database somewhere publicly available, first of all, will save a lot of money, because you no longer need to run that placebo. Of course, you have to think of constantly updating it, because treatment of standard of care of treatment also changes. So if you take placebo patients from I don't know, 1970s, it would be very different 50 years from there, right? So you have to have an update to that information. But, the collaboration between the companies, collaboration between pharmaceutical industry, I think that's what will drive kind of reduction of cost and risk to the innovation.
Is the incentive structure set up for that to take place, though? Like, if I was a pharma company investing all of this time and money, I kind of probably see it as a zero-sum game. Like, I'm trying to bring this drug to market so that I can benefit from the profits that come from it.
Yeah, I think infrastructure isn't there, for sure. Just because you're right, incentives are very tough to place, right? But there are consortiums, so I think there are goodwill consortiums where people collaborate around a particular development or in indications which are very difficult to manage. So they're starting to exist, and I think once we see the benefits of it, it's kind of all or nothing. So if everybody does it, I think everybody will be doing that. But if it becomes a norm, but it's a very aggressive, competitive market, drug development. It's very expensive. It's driven very often by science, but also ability to commercialize. And you understand that because the biotech companies, which are smaller, even though they start with scientific idea, which may work in a particular population, they have to adapt to realities of the world. They need money to run the trials. They need the right teams to support them on that journey. And so you have to really think what makes sense commercially as well as scientifically.
So the people that are watching the podcast probably are either already working on their own projects or they're looking for really valuable problems in the world to build potentially a business around. So I guess this is where I'd love to get your insight, Olga. Based on your experience in the kind of drug development industry, what opportunities do you see that we can use to make this whole process more efficient? Or maybe another way of asking it are, what are the constraints on the system?
Well, so the system is quite complex, right? I think my first advice is probably not to try to solve all problems at once, because every indication in drug development will require a different approach. Every therapeutic area, so a set of indications, will have its own specifics. And you can't develop a drug which would work for everybody at every disease. That's kind of not possible. The constraints on the system of drug development, right, of clinical trials, is all about data. How do you efficiently utilize and manage data? And I think this is where opportunities probably starting to be explored, but maybe not as explored as they could be. So what do you do with the data? How do you collide the data and manage that data? How do you get some insights from the data which are valuable? How do you keep up with innovation that is happening today in the pharmaceutical industry? So thinking through it, and there are fascinating companies coming all the time, from big databases with added AI functionality to data management platforms, to niche providers like Image Analysis Group, to sort of, somebody who might unify it all in one big conglomerate and help the whole industry to move forward.
We've also talked about before different approaches that existing companies are taking to helping the clinical trials process. So one of them is like these wearable devices. Other ones you've talked about applications of robotics in the clinical. Could you maybe elaborate on some of those that you found really interesting?
Yes, for sure. I think, AI technology and automation is absolutely finding its way into drug development. Because since COVID, we understand that you have to make it patient-centric, you have to make it convenient, you have to make it cheaper and faster. Because otherwise the drug which comes out of the process is going to be too expensive and puts further burden on the system. So how to achieve it is, of course, to think about decentralized data, how to make sense out of it, how to acquire it, how to control its quality, how to...
When you say decentralized data, what does that mean?
So data acquired by a patient at any given point. So your watch with measuring your heartbeat would be decentralized data. But how do I control the fact that you can just take your watch off, or you can put it on your cat? So it's very difficult to control, right? So if I get the data stream, which looks like it's okay, but you actually gave your watch to your friend to wear, and you are sitting on a bench and not walking as instructed, then what happens? Yeah. So while decentralized, so patient-centric data, which is coming into the system, is a great idea, how do you impose monitoring? I mean, do you put a camera into that watch, or do you track some actions? So it's a real kind of puzzle to make the data easy to get, but reliable when you get it. And robotics is another way of, of course, automating some process within the data management or data access is a fascinating way. I would say probably something here which is very important. All this data is about a person. It's a personalized data. And the real AI workflows, the real AI value will come when we start trusting the system. And we can only trust the system if we have security and reliability kind of built into the system. Meaning that, okay, I can collect the data, but then it gets sold to a big pharma company and they're gonna start marketing me something. How do I know that's not gonna happen? So here, of course, the role of the safeguards, trust in the system, compliance of the system, audit trail of your data, making sure it actually has real security behind it. That's very, very important for AI to be more real in our world.
I'd love to switch it up now and actually discuss more about your experience in IAG. So you're the president of IAG. What does that mean?
So I always joke that my only job was CEO. So I started a company, I became CEO. So for 15 years I was a CEO. And it's a unique experience because when you hold no other job but the CEO, you really don't know what other jobs look like, right? Obviously, I could see my team working in operations or science or finance, but you are in a position of trying to drive the company. So we got to the point where the business became large enough and scaled enough for me not being able to handle the business matters and the kind of client science, external, I would call them, matters, right? So it's more of an input from outside. So we work with incredible companies who are drivers of innovation. So I want to spend more time with them. I want to understand what their problems are. I want to understand what does the future looks like for drug development, like we're talking today. I'm very curious what the next 10 years is going to look like and constantly looking for the answer. So I hired CEO to the business who comes from a very similar industry, very different background. And I think it's a new life, new phase of image analysis group. So we now have a management team that drives the business forward and run by the CEO. And my role as a president is really being the evangelist for the business and also gives me ability to be much closer to our key customers, key clients, key opinion leaders in this industry. So spending a little bit more time thinking through partners, collaborators, future, and also introducing our business into newer areas, which has always been a part of my role, but now this is becoming more and more of essential role for the business. We ourselves also preparing for the next phase because I truly believe within few years, AI, automation, clinical trials in one sentence would mean disruption, complete disruption to the industry. So how do we make sure that we're ready for it, right? How do we make sure that we fit into that new infrastructure? Because also I think everybody who doesn't have this thinking, who kind of thinks from the past and relies on the data from the past, in danger of being left behind. This industry is driven by innovation. We're sitting on epicenter of something new every day. I don't think in any other industry we have drug discoveries or innovative sort of breakthroughs like that. This is real, epicenter of new, of unexplored, of thinkers. So we have to be ready. And I think I really love the fact that we managed to separate president and the CEO. It's not an obvious separation in a small company like ours, so relatively small to...
How many people are you now?
We're just under 100 people. So we're growing fast, but we're keeping the core team with ability to scale very quickly as we're scaling the revenues and client base.
And over the last 17 years you've been in business?
Yeah, nearly, yes.
17 years, wow. How have you, in a world of uncertainty, and in a space within science and biotech of extreme uncertainty, figured out which problems you should be solving when? Like, how do you stay on top of that balance between, growing the thing that you can see working and making sure that you're working on the right opportunities?
Oh, that's a holy grail. So biotech, while uncertain, you can start sensing the waves where it's going pretty early on. I mean, obviously there are some unexpected breakthroughs always, right? But you could see how there are, I would say, pillars of biotechnology, right? You've got oncology, which is one of the largest markets with many unsolved problems. You've got immunology and kind of metabolic diseases, immunology, everything related to your immune system and manifestations of immune system. And you've got neuroscience, which is brain related. They are connected and not connected. So for me, I constantly watch for these three areas, how they're developing. So who is on the horizon, which companies are rising up, which therapeutics are rising up, and how that may manifest in a few years, because it takes 10 years to develop a drug. It doesn't happen overnight, but you could already see investor interest. So I'm advising a couple of investment funds on what to look for, and I also get a stream of very interesting business plans, which again, very, very interesting to see how people developing their drugs, where they see competitive advantage themselves as a biotech company. Then you can deploy that at scale and you can start getting this information before it occurs. So we get ready for the next generation therapeutics, so we have appropriate endpoints and biomarkers to address those.
And then outside of IAG, it sounds like you've gone through this transition of working in the business to working on the business. What's that mindset shift been like for you? How have you almost let go of the reins of your, let's say, your baby, the company you founded?
I'd say with difficulties. I think it's very difficult to just let go. I think the let go is based always on trust. So I have a lot of people in the business who I trust, not just with the business, probably with my life. So it's very nice to have a team like that. And I also know they're better than me at doing certain things. So I think a combination of trust and trying to logically convince yourself that they're better than you, that would help you to step back. But I think the business is also changing every single quarter, every single 6 months. So we're putting in place controls to make sure that we always see how the business progressing and changes. And it comes everything from operational excellence. So how many clients do we have with the satisfaction 10 out of 10? That tells us that operations working well. When we do audits of the platform, or our clients do audits to our platform or tech operations, how many observations do they make? So if it's a 0, then it's a great metric, right? You have commercial revenues, right? So how quickly you convert in business, what are your revenues per quarter, what is your client basket of client looks like, is it in this indication or this size, etc. So once you have this operational controls, financial controls in the business, then you power people to thrive to those operational controls. And I think it's a little bit of a logic in management. So I've never had a formal training in being the CEO. I think it's just logic how you would think about somebody being successful in a role. if you give somebody responsibility for driving your operational excellence, they need to know what they're striving for.
How do you set up, tell us a little bit more about your organizational design and how you've thought about that. So do you have specific department owners, one dedicated person that has autonomy over their own team with like one or two key metrics they're looking to optimize, or how has that perhaps changed as you've grown?
So it's a very good question, because I think as you grow in the business from zero to any type of like level of revenues, your management team will change a lot. First of all, you can afford only a certain amount of people within a certain amount of revenues. And secondly, I think you also start working out when it makes sense to separate your departments versus keeping everything under one roof. When I started the business, it was me and another guy. So I was a CEO, he was a software developer. And I think in that tight collaboration of two people, you very clearly see your roles. You're responsible for clients, you're responsible for delivery. And I think that simplified setup could actually take you to your first million and maybe beyond. Because in revenue terms, what matters is that you're bringing new clients and you're delivering well. And actually delivering well, and that setup meant good operations, good software. That's kind of it. Once you're starting growing into organizations that has operational teams across several continents, or you have clients which require attention to particular matter, you start thinking, does it make sense to have one person overlooking over entirety of operations? Or does it make sense to separate technology and operations? Or does it make sense to separate technology, operations, and oversight? And to which level oversight? Is it the quality oversight and customer success oversight? So I think you constantly try to build a balance between not overburdening your management team, because you don't want to have 20 reports when you have 1 million revenues. What's the point of that? Everybody distracts each other. But you equally don't want to miss the point where it makes sense to scale that, because then you can definitely give responsibility within a certain area to a particular person and power them up to be successful. So where we are today, and I think it's a very interesting place, because historically I could see many businesses kind of hit the first million and stays there. Then for some reason they hit 3 million mark and they stay there. Then they hit 10 million mark and they stay there. So we want to be much more than that, and that where we are today, we're looking at operational excellence. And this is delivering clinical trials with a team that is distributed across 3 continents right now. And people placed in the US, in Europe, in UK, in Asia. So it's a real operation of operations. On top of the operations of operations, we have a customer success driver. So somebody who really understands the accounts, what the customer wants, what is their bigger problems beyond one trial they run with us, or a couple of trials they run with us. So our operational team got very natural structure of somebody really working hard on delivering certain projects and reporting to somebody who is thinking about account as a whole. So we put our best people on top of these 2 organizations. Right? It's one organization with 2 levels. Technology-wise, you have more complexity here because you have need to build the tech platform. You have need to build novel methodologies. You have to maintain quality standards.
And often those are 2 very different kinds of engineers.
Completely different kinds of engineers. Took me a while to realize that people who can build algorithms are very different from people who build software.
Totally.
So we now got it right, I believe. So we've got the right team, and we're very happy with technical expertise. We're very happy with the ability to innovate. Our customers are very happy, which is more important than anything. But building a foundational software, building this infrastructure, that takes time, very different mindset, very different process, very different user group even. Comparing to building AI, endpoints, information kind of related algorithms, quality is even like further setup which oversees all of it in collaboration with operational excellence. So you have to combine completely different mindsets, tech and operations, under one umbrella of quality, which makes it very, very interesting because they even operate under different standards. So for operations, it's CFR 21 Part 11. For tech, it's ISO 13485. Like even standards are different. So when you build in an imaging CRO which has tech function and operational function, you have to be pretty smart how to place people in the right places and make them successful. You can think about massive teams who overlap and talk to each other all the time. You could think about training people in each other's jobs. So there are many ways how to get it right. So I think we've got a bit of a secret sauce here, and I think we got it right. Sales is another organization, and it's almost an organization in its own right. So everything obviously comes down to revenues and sales and how you penetrate new territories and how you speak to customers. So sales team or business development team and sales team and marketing team is its own world, which I'm fascinated by. And that's probably where businesses spend the most time thinking and talking about, because if you get that right, you can then translate that knowledge, because you're getting right in front of the customers. So if you understand what the customers want, you just empowered with information, and that's all you need to further build, to further improve, to further deliver. So business development, sales, marketing for me is a very interesting conundrum. So I'm very fascinated how to combine science and sales, how to get the right balance between it. When I'm speaking at podcasts or webinars, I'm interested who is listening. Is it the customers listening, or is it competitors, or are those people who are gonna come and help me to think of new ideas? But that's all about sales and marketing and science, and it all sits into one place somehow. So it's fascinating.
Well, what I love about what you said is that I guess maybe we could assume that salespeople take something you've already made that is proven to be valuable and then sell it to clients, times however much revenue they can generate. But it's certainly the stage of the business that IAG is at, where you're working on new use cases, you're exploring potential partnerships. Sales becomes your eyes and ears into who cares about solving what problems and how valuable are solving these different problems.
Very much so, and I think it's a conversation I was never, obviously you have very specific problems. Like, I've got a trial which has imaging and I need platform to collect that image. Very clear problem, right? So here's a platform, here's the price. It's never that simple in biotech and pharma, because it requires real collaboration between the customer and the salesperson to achieve the right outcome, because maybe the customer doesn't even know what they want to do or how they want to interact, not necessarily experiencing that operational execution or that indication. So the sales team as advisors, effectively, very, very well-placed advisors to think through what's valuable, but even throw new ideas. So we like to get involved in conversations as the protocol being developed, as the clinical trial protocol essentials being developed. Because if you get involved in the right place, you make sure operationally it's feasible, scientifically it's sound. You're not putting something into your protocol which is impossible to execute. You start thinking about the right partners straight from the beginning, and it drives the price, because again, it's a balance between amount of things you can do versus how much it's gonna cost, and the success of that whole journey. So you have to be very early on in that process and really understanding how to work it out in a best possible outcome for the customers.
And this, I guess, the final question on the business side of things with IAG, and I want to make this really relatable for people that are not just within biotech. I'd love to get your thoughts on this balance of building high quality products versus the importance of validating the need first. And I guess this is through the lens of, yes, where IAG is today, but also let's wind back 17 years to you and your software developer, co-founding the first version of the business. How have you approached making sure that you're not investing tons of resources, money, time, engineering thought and attention into building, but instead making sure it's a valuable problem to solve first?
So first of all, I think any business set up at any given time will not be the same business by the time this business is sold or transitioned. Simply because I think it's impossible to have a crystal ball of knowing what exactly the problem is. You have a feel and you start somewhere and you listen, and you adjust your idea. I started a business selling software for radiologists. I ended up with a business of clinical trials with imaging component. Not the same even group of people who would be buying the services. You just look for the best fit for your product and your idea. I think starting a business around ideas that you're passionate about, that's the right place to start. Because you're going to end up with this idea and this conversation for the next 10 years. So you have to have strength and passion to repeat yourself to many, many, many people. I think I have over 20,000 people on my LinkedIn following me. And I'm repeating the same story for the last 10 years. And I love the story. I think it's super fascinating and multifaceted. I think personality-wise, I would struggle to sell a chair because there's only so many things I could say about the chair. Great chair. But I'm sure a designer of the chair would probably be able to speak for 10 or more years about the design of the chair and distribution of the legs and the back angle and a seat and whatever. But for them, that's a passion. For me, the radiology, the imaging, the drug development, that's the passion. I can talk about it endlessly. So you have to have your passion first. You have to have a rough product second. And a mindset that the whole thing may change and you should be ready for it.
Let's go back to that point around passion.
Okay.
What at its core inspires you to be so passionate about drug development?
I think it makes a real difference. I want to be in my 60s looking back and thinking it was worth doing it. I think I would struggle to look back and think, wow, I wasted so many years. That to me would be really painful. Even looking back in the past 12 months, I'm questioning myself, did I waste my time? Was it impactful? What has been achieved? So I'm a very accountable person on a personal milestone.
We've talked about this before. You actually do these kind of annual review, life check-in. What does that look like?
So I think it's a step change, I call it, in my own head. If you want to grow a business little by little, 10% a year, or I don't know, 20% a year even, you just do what you do it well. And that probably will generate you that growth. But if you want to grow your business by 50, 70, 100 or more % a year, you really have to set yourself goals. And you have to work really hard to get to those goals. And sometimes they're not very straightforward. So every year, I like to sit down and think, what is the business going to like in 12 months from now? What is going to be the step change? Doesn't have to be necessarily grounded in a revenue, so of growth, but some element for sure in revenues. But even in tech, so by the end of 2025, what's going to happen to Dynamica, our platform? By the end of 2026, what it's going to look like? Once you define those goals, you strive for those goals. And you check yourself on a quarterly basis that you're hitting them, of course. And you're just thinking, if I'm going to achieve that in 12 months' time, is that a step change for the business?
What do you mean when you say step change? I hear this phrase thrown around a lot, and I really want to understand it in your world.
In my world, it's a step which is you step up. So you not gradually slide up, but you really throw your leg over a fence and like climb to the next level. Right?
It's almost like a leap into new possibility.
Leap. Yes, that's a good word for it. Absolutely. So for us, for instance, 2024, what it is, right? So we started 24. I brought the CEO. So for me, the step change was, will this management team work by the end of 24, right? Yes or no? We had Dynamica version 6. We started building it 6 months before the start of the year. Now we released Dynamica version 7. So release of the platform how is that accepted by the customer. But our actual goal was to run studies on Dynamica 7. So it's not just like theoretically released, it's used in studies. And now we're running an incredible phase 3 program which runs with the speed of light because software is powered by AI. There are methodologies which are being developed as we speak. So it's really different place to be from January to December. That makes me very happy. We brought a new chief commercial officer. So we're looking at a new sales organization. We're looking at me being the president, another step change for the business. So 24, there was more initiatives. I'm only sort of highlighting sort of the obvious ones which probably would be relevant for any business. Tech, team, revenue.
And you knew all of this at the start of the year?
Yes, you put that in the start of the year.
Got it. So your look forward is like a year each time. You find that to be
Absolutely.
a good. And then the quarterly is just how are we tracking against those goals?
Yeah. You don't slip somewhere. Obviously, there are always some fires to fight, etc. But you get back on track and track your performance again as a set goals. You can't have too many of them, of course. You can have only a few. But what you need to really realize at the beginning of the year, by accomplishing these goals, are they going to make a step change or is it a gradual growth? Because maybe sometimes for the business it's not too bad to have a fractional growth, right? 10% growth. Not a bad thing. Maybe it's a year to stabilize a little bit.
But I'd love to go back to some of those really real moments where you were questioning, am I working on the right thing here? Am I heading in the right direction? Is it all worth it? Have there been challenges where you've really doubted whether this is what you want to be spending your time doing? And I asked that question from a place of, I want to make this really, really, real so that we can get behind the veil of success and the direction that we see, entrepreneurs on now. What does it really look like when things start going sideways? And how do you figure out, if you're ultimately heading in the right direction, if there is another step change that can happen that can get us where we need to be, or whether actually it's worth, strategically quitting this idea to start working on the next?
I think it's very interesting. So obviously there were always moments of panic and insecurity and uncertainty. I was just, endless moments, so not even worth mentioning. But I think a realization for me is, as an entrepreneur, as a passionate individual, as somebody who believes in a business, you have to operate on data, because data is something which should really speak to you back. It's like your mirror. I remember when COVID happened, it happened in February. We all came from the largest conference, which happens every January, called JP Morgan Conference in San Francisco. We all came back with thousands of people there. And then people start closing borders. In March, I was in the US, and Trump closed borders with Europe and with UK and some other countries. And then we were told to go home and work from home by the governments. And I thought, that's going to pass. Because as an entrepreneur, you're feeling optimistic, you want to do business. It was March, we were working from home, everybody okay, we go home for a couple of weeks, we come back. And I remember flying back to Europe, I think in April or May, 2 months into COVID. And I had this Harvard Business Review, old one, and it said, the biggest mistakes people make, they don't believe in presence. Like when the war starts, you have to realize it's a war. You have to change, and you have to change now. You don't wait for 6 months because it's too late. So for me, it was such a profound article. I landed and I gave a notice to all our offices. We closed all offices overnight. We saved 2 years worth of rent as a result of it. We set all our people with opportunity to work from home, because for the next 2 years, we all work from home. We put in place tools around the system, how we're going to communicate. So we stopped making this abnormality. We made reality normal. And I think it was real help for us, because as a business, if you believe that something is happening and something else is happening. That's the most dangerous place you can be. I'd rather have all the bad news and all data in front of me so I can deal with that, instead of being blindsided to actual facts and then being revealed this fact 6 months later when I could have dealt with that 6 months earlier. So I think the moments of doubt and moments of uncertainties, if you substantiate it in data and in reality check and what actually you can do about it, I think it helps to run through whatever circumstances. Because we're all smart, we're all driven, we're all passionate. We can figure things out. If you can't figure it out, we ask somebody else and they can help you to figure that out.
But we often cloud, this reality distortion because it's not quite how we want it to turn out, rather than dealing with reality.
Precisely. And I think that's the most dangerous place to be for any entrepreneur. So if you need a reality check, if your idea is working, and you don't have the strength yourself, you ask your friend to go and ask 3 customers. If you have an idea and you've been building for 10 years and you think it's a great business and you have 0 customers, then it's a reality check, right? Every single day or every single kind of turn of events, you can just get the data stream back to you, and you just need an independent view on what's going on. Sometimes it's not pleasant and sometimes it's hard, but it's much healthier and much better to deal it this way than cover yourself under blankets and not make decisions.
But that's getting to the point where we know what we need to change. How do you then approach making the change? Do you almost depersonalize from, okay, this was the hand of cards that I was dealt, I just need to kind of fold this hand to move on to the next opportunity? How do you rationalize that it's in your best interest in the long term?
I think when you are in this, you know how to change it, you know what to do. Because every business will experience it differently. And sometimes it's a tech that doesn't work. Sometimes it's a number of users you didn't get. Sometimes it's whatever it might be, right? I think it just needs to be like that check for yourself. You don't need to share it with anybody. And you could still disagree with it if you still want to disagree with it. But unless you sit down, look at the data, look at what's going on, it's a cost of opportunity as well. So the sooner you change, the more impactful your change will be for you as a founder and a builder, as well as for the team.
Last couple of questions before we wrap up, and this has been wonderful. After you've spent the last 17 years in IAG, there are bound to have been people that were quite pivotal to helping you get radically honest with yourself, to helping kind of help you define what you wanted to build and what future you wanted to create with IAG. Who are the people that you would say along your journey in work and in life have really made an impression on you, and what have those impressions been?
Oh, it's interesting. I would say among those people are for sure the real people who I work with or worked in the past, but also the people who come from around us, right? So the successes or the failures. So I absolutely love following business stories of businesses. So for me, the Harvard Business Review or the books around somebody building a business, like SoundCloud was a recent interesting book, or any person who built, and there will inevitably be failures and successes, and I love reading about it because I think those people are as much inspiration to you as the people you write in your immediate vicinity, right? So I think for me, there were many people in the business who were absolutely pivotal, and each of them contributed tremendous amount to the business. They were there in the right time, they might have moved on with their lives, they might come back, so it's a very fluid environment. I think chairman, I had 3 different chairmen in the business, each very different to each other. So my first chairman was extremely supportive, knowledgeable, educatable, sort of, giving me the depths of what business may look like. My second chairman was taking the business to the new scale. My third chairman is taking it onto a global scale and helping rationalize certain decisions. I think even within a business, as a CEO, you would pick a chairman. So I had an opportunity to pick my own chairman, right? So it was as you know, as a founder of the business, you have a lot of privileges. But I would always pick somebody who would give me equally a challenge and opportunity to grow. Because you don't want to be around people who just agree with you at all points. So you want that dynamic where you have healthy disagreement, you have opportunity to challenge your own thinking, have a sounding board. So I would say, as you build in a business, be prepared for a change of the team, change of the management team, change of your board of directors. But all of that is a positive. All of it helps you to propel the business to the new level.
So, final question from me, Olga. Imagine we could fast forward, let's say, 30 years in the future. And you and I are sitting next to each other on our proverbial deck chair, under the stars. And I turn to you and I say, Olga, what was it all for?
Well, for bettering of the world, of course. What else would matter? I think in 30 years from now, it still will be pretty much the race, maybe at even higher pace than it is today. So I think you want to feel that you contributed to establishing something which lasts, and human health is something which absolutely will be of value. Longevity, health, better lives. I think that really makes a big difference.
I've loved the time together. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you.